Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for stopping by. We're going to recap Miami's complete 2022 staff under Coach Mario Cristobal. David, what's going on?
Excited. Took a while to get here, but I think the end result of this coaching staff is, of course, what matters most. And it's we'll get into it, but I think it's one of the better staffs we've seen here in many, many years.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into it. We'll start with the offense. We'll go to the defense, talk about it's 5-5 essentially for each side of the ball. Yeah, there's a few things that stand out to me that I'll get into. I've got a few little stats that I want to bring up with the staff, but David, as a whole, if you could just, and again, we'll break it down completely, but just summarize your overall impressions, because like you said, it took a while to get here, but here we are, and heading into spring ball.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different areas we could go here, but I think a big kind of overarching point to make is you get what you pay for when you put together coaching staffs. And one of the reasons why Miami was able to bring Mario Cristobal home was because they made the commitment to spend in many different areas. One of those areas being assistant coach staffing pool, right? So, the number, I don't know exactly what it is at this point, but it was believed to be around $8 million. And with that amount of money, Mario Cristobal went out and got a Broyles Award winner at offensive coordinator, a proven defensive coordinator that's been successful in the SEC, another proven defensive coordinator that's also been head coaches at big time program. That's been a head coach at a big time program. Some up and coming recruiters that have gotten results as recently as this last recruiting class. So again, this is the big money era in college football. In order to attract top level staffs, you got to pay them. And Mario Cristobal landed a great bunch of proven commodities that I think are going to deliver results in time.
So there's 10 assistant coaches. And just to recap real quick, and then we'll start right in with Coach Gaddis on the offensive coordinator. But the 8 that were coaching last year, and I'm not counting Kevin Steele, but the 8 college coaches, 7 of them were coaching at programs that won at least 10 games. 6 of those guys, 6 of the 8 made a championship game in their conference, and 5 of the 8 finished ranked. You're talking about coaches that are used to winning. You touched on Coach Gaddis. Michigan was in the playoff, and then Coach Jamal Adai, a guy that won a national championship at Georgia. So that's my takeaway in general. You're getting coaches that won a lot of games recently. They know what it takes to win. They've coached great players. And like you said, the experience of being around big-time college football. And as a whole, that's the big takeaway for me. These guys won games. They know how to win. And I think there's no question. I think the Miami fan base, I think a lot of people are going to expect Miami to win. And I don't think that they're going to wait very long, right or wrong. I think, like you said, with the expectations of the big money that Coach Cristobal is being paid and the coaching assistants, I think that there will be high expectations on this team immediately. And honestly, David, and maybe we can disagree, but I don't think people are wrong. I think this is a team that can compete, and we can get into that, compete for an ACC title, and therefore have a good season.
Can I build on your point with the proven commodity stuff with the coaching staff? I think one thing to point out too, right? What has Mario Cristobal built his career on? Recruiting, right? I think you can look at, let's just say, the previous regime, right? There was some coaches that were up and coming coaches, which is fine, but I think they had to learn on the job about what a Miami level player looks like, right? So it took maybe a year or two on the recruiting trail to understand these are the types of players that can win championships. I don't think that's a concern with this staff, as you were alluding to. They come from programs that have won. These guys have recruited developed NFL level players. And so to me, that's something to touch on too, right? Mario Cristobal values recruiting. All these guys know what big time players look like. And quite frankly, the more important thing is they have the ability to land big time players, because for the most part, it's easy to see who the big time players are when you go to events. The ability to connect with those players and reel them in is a different level.
So we've touched on two of the three things that stand out to me with this staff. We touched on the winning culture that's been established. These guys are used to winning. You just touched on recruiting at a high level. And the third thing that's standing out to me, and this goes right at the top with Coach Cristobal, but it's the passion and intensity. When you talk to different people, and the people that I've talked to that you guys have seen on the videos, interviewing people that have been around these coaches, a lot of them talk about how intense they are or how much passion they have for the game. And I think as a staff, Coach Cristobal is trying to find guys that he wants to work with. And I think he did a good job of that, because I think a lot of these guys have those same qualities as a staff, things they bring to the table to a team.
He's a demanding coach, right? And it takes a special person, I think, to want to work with someone like a Mario Cristobal. His style, the demands he puts on his coaching staff isn't going to be for everyone, quite frankly. And that's okay. It's Mario's job to find people who will embrace those expectations, those demands. And I agree. It's a different, we can already see it. It's a different culture inside the building right now. And the hope is that translates on the field sooner rather than later.
So let's go right into the offense. Miami's coming off a season 7-5. They were 5th in the ACC in total offense, 5th in scoring offense. Josh Gaddis comes in from Michigan. And the big thing with Josh Gaddis is his style of offense. What is he going to run? David, I'm sure you think the same way, because we've talked about this, but it definitely feels like he's going to build his offense with what they have, because he's had to make adjustments at Michigan and kind of where he's been in the past, where he's going to try to make the most of it. And I find that style to be interesting, because not all coaches do that. Sometimes coaches come in and say, this is what we run. And we've seen this at Miami. This is what we run. You guys are going to have to fit into it or else. And I think Coach Gaddis, I'm expecting him to kind of look in, especially spring ball. I think he's going to look at these guys. I know he's been looking at them on film, but see them in person and practice how they're going to compete and try to get the most out of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if you're necessarily expecting the Michigan style of offense, I don't think that's what we're going to see. I think it's going to be closer in some ways to the spread stuff that we saw from Rhett Lashley. Now, I do think they want to establish the run much more. I think, there's going to be some power principles to this offense. But if we're looking at the personnel that Josh Gaddis is inheriting here in year one, I think they're going to find out, right? How much can we lean on this offensive line to generate run push? And they'll see during the spring and make a determination on whether, how much power they can really lean on this year. But I do think the long-term vision is a balanced offense, right? Which I don't think anyone should complain about. For some reason, there's a connotation that balance means boring. I don't think that's the case. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I don't want to see an offense that can do both effectively, run the ball and pass the ball. Miami last year definitely could pass the ball, but they were a one-dimensional offense that, that rushing attack scared nobody. So I think that is the goal, to improve the rushing offense this year, while maintaining, hopefully, a pretty good passing attack. And if that's what they accomplish in year one, that's a success, and they can build off that moving forward.
I'm a big believer, and you've got to have a run game now. Does that mean you go back to an I formation and pound the ball with the fullback up there? No, I don't believe like that, but I do believe you can run the ball, and I think it's important to run the ball. We've seen other teams in college football be able to run the ball effectively, and they win a lot of games. Like you said, Miami struggled in the run game last year, 12th in the ACC of the 14 teams. They were last in yards per carry. When you look at Miami's running backs and, combining that with a quarterback, now Van Dyke, when they had De'Aaron King, he could certainly run the ball, but Van Dyke could pick up runs too. Miami should be outperforming those numbers. And I think with Coach Gaddis, I think they'll find a good balance. And you mentioned the offensive line, because if we really be frank about this, I think that's going to be the key in the spring in determining, like you said, what are they going to be able to do? Will they be able to do a lot of drop back stuff? Will they be able to pound the ball up the middle? Will they have to revert to, will they have to go outside with outside runs quite a bit? How will they be able to navigate the offense with the offensive line? So I think that they will certainly be a key focal point, because you pretty much know what you have in quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. At the quarterback position, certainly he can still improve, but other than that, I think the offensive line is where they're going to be looking at the most.
Which maybe transitions. I don't know if this is too early, but I like the vision of this coaching staff in that we know Mario Cristobal gets hands-on with the offensive line, even as the head coach, right? So essentially, Miami has 2 offensive line coaches working with that group. That group's going to get put under a microscope. That group is going to get coached hard. And yeah, hopefully they come out of spring knowing what they got. And, depending on how they feel about things, they can try and make some moves maybe via the transfer portal. But I agree. I mean, look, it's boring. Like, fans don't enjoy talking about the offensive line, but it does determine everything, if we're being honest, about an offense. And so I do think they're going to get that line to be more effective in run blocking. Quite frankly, I don't know if they could get worse. But yeah, get that run blocking improved. Hopefully you give those running backs more space to operate in and have a balanced offense.
David, I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I believe Miami fans, and if they're watching this, listening to us, they know the importance of the offensive line. I feel like there's a lot of people that want to see Miami get their offensive line back on track. And David, just off the top of my head, it's been a while, right? It's been a while since we've seen a really good offensive line at Miami. I don't know if we have to go back to 2013 when a lot of those guys got, they eventually got into the NFL at some point. I don't know if it goes as far back as that. I'd have to think about it, but certainly they've got to be better. Alex Mirabal is going to coach the offensive line. You touched on Coach Cristobal. Their connection is going to be very important because they see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I like that for a coaching staff to have guys that you can work with and you have a good understanding. Now, a lot of these guys on the staff, Coach Cristobal is going to be working with for the first time. But so having a guy like Coach Mirabal is going to be important. And like you said, the importance of this line getting better, either by personnel changes or philosophy or whatever it might be, I think it's going to be certainly a key in this whole thing and getting this thing right.
And I would expect too, it's going to be a different, like I'm talking 2-3 years of recruiting, talent acquisition on the offensive line. It's going to be a different looking offensive line. I think we're going to see big, powerful offensive linemen, 330, 6'5", 330 type guys, rather than, we've kind of seen in recent years, smaller offensive linemen, for lack of a better term, guys that they want to develop in the weight program, tackles that come in, which can work, is fine. 6'6", 260. We've seen interior guys that are 6'3" and smaller that they're willing to take, which again is fine if you're fine with a finesse style of offense. I just don't, that's where I'm interested this spring to see how do they mesh what they want on the offensive line with what they got, because it's the personnel I think is much different than what they left in Oregon on the offensive line.
And it's an excellent point because this is what they have. They can certainly make some tweaks in getting players, but certainly you can't overhaul a position group immediately. It's just not how it works. David, let's transition to the running game. We'll get into the passing game, but we touched on it a little bit. But Kevin Smith comes over, a lot of experience coaching productive backs, did really well at Ole Miss last year with their running game. I like the fact that he's used to having a couple guys in there, 2-3 guys. Henry Parrish comes over, he's used to working with him. But I think this could certainly benefit. And personally, I really like that he has experience, not just in the NFL and being productive back there, but his college numbers. This is a guy that's been there, done that. I like that at the running back spot. And he can kind of really relate. I'm expecting him to relate to Miami backs, and certainly getting high quality backs will be important. And I think that's my big takeaway on why I say don't get away from the run game, even though you can spread it out, is because there's a lot of talent at running back in South Florida. It's not dried up. There's always been talent at the running back spot, and I expect that to continue. So I would like Miami to play to its strengths at the recruiting front, get those guys on campus, get them on the team, and that's why I believe in that. And Miami's best teams have been able to run the ball, frankly. So that's why I think it's important to have a strong running game.
Yeah. Last year's leading rusher, Jalen Knight, I think has talent, makes plays, but also that glaring 3.9 yards per carry is hard to excuse, right? And I do think, being fair to Jalen, some of that is on the offensive line. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, another guy that knows what it looks like because he did it. He went to the NFL. I kind of like too that uh, he's a South Florida guy, South Ridge, um, kind of under the radar guy. So he might know what traits to look for. Um, and he's honestly, I think he's a bigger guy physically than people would expect, which I like. I think Miami needs to start getting back to having some 215, 220 backs with speed still. Um, and yeah, I think Kevin Smith is a big time hire. Um, and yeah, Miami has to get back to running the ball. The best offenses we've seen, even when Miami here the past 15 years hasn't been up to the Miami standard, but the best offenses Miami has had have had good running backs. Lamar Miller, Duke Johnson, Mark Walton in 2016. You got to have, and all those guys, by the way, from Dade County. So um, it's a huge key, and the 2023 cycle is loaded in the state of Florida at running back.
And you could just, if you wanted to keep going back, Willis McGahee, Najee Davenport, Frank Gore, these are
Right.
just other backs just from this area, just really quickly. It's interesting. I'd be interested in asking Coach Smith if he would recruit it. Would he have recruited himself? Would he have known that this was going to be a guy that ran for 2,000 in college? I'd just be curious to see if he could have identified it, if everyone else just made mistakes or if he just got better. Just that conversation. I'd be very interested in hearing what he has to say there. Frank Ponce comes over from Appalachian State to coach quarterbacks. I like that he was, very involved in being an offensive coordinator. I like that he has the experience at Louisville. That's going to be a very good spot. I had a chance to talk to one of his former quarterbacks in Zach Thomas, who was very accomplished at App State there. It was very interesting on some of the things he had to say, just very complimentary and really worked with them. And one of the things that stands out to me, and also working with Malik Cunningham there at Louisville, he's been working with the dual threat guys. And I think that's going to be interesting moving forward with the type of quarterbacks Miami goes with, and certainly working with Tyler Van Dyke. He had really complimentary things to say about him already. And I think that's a good sign. I think just developing that strong relationship and really have a good understanding of communication. I think it's the biggest position, assistant coach, that you need with communication and working with your players. I think there's no better person is that quarterback's coach, having that good line of talking and communication and understanding. And based on, talking to people and what Frank has done in his coaching career, he's going to have that. And I think he'll be successful at Miami because of those reasons.
What are your thoughts on, because it's, typically offensive coordinators are also the quarterback coach, right? 9 times out of 10, right? Do you like that? I kind of like it that Miami has a position coach for just that position. We've seen instances of it not working at Miami with John Richt. We've seen instances of it working with the Rob Chazinski, Dan Werner pairing with OC and quarterback coach. Do you like that? Because my understanding on Frank Ponce is he's a demanding coach. He pushes his room pretty hard, which I like, because I think a lot of times quarterbacks get treated with kid gloves. And I kind of like having a position coach for that group that's going to push them independently of the offensive coordinator.
Honestly, I'd probably prefer that the coordinator was the quarterback's coach, just because it seems to be quite in line with everything. However, the big key for Miami in this one is Ponce and Gaddis working hand in hand, Ponce being able to relay information and Gaddis coming back to it as well. I always like when the coordinator doesn't have as much position responsibility, just a whole more of a overseer, and we'll get to that on the defensive side. But I like that they don't have that responsibility and they can just focus on the total group. Now, Coach Gaddis is a unique guy, though. Would you prefer that he has an offensive background? You don't see that very often where he does coach, that he played defense. I find that to be very unique. So he's going to coach the receivers. And I think it's going to be very unique to see how that works out. But, yes, I'd probably prefer that the quarterback coach was the coordinator just because that's more typical. But I'm fine with the setup here. And I think it's going to work out if Coach Ponce and Gaddis have that constant line of communication, and Gaddis, Ponce is able to relay the same messages from Gaddis and whatnot. I think that will be key.
And you have to Ponce, honestly, you could argue is overqualified in terms of his trajectory for this job, right? Because he goes from being a play caller, offensive coordinator at a group of 5 program that was borderline a top 40 offense, depending on the metric. So it says a lot to me that he was willing to take a step back, so to speak. Now, I don't think he took a step back salary wise, but just perception, what his job is, to come home to Miami, work with a guy he's worked with in the past. And quite frankly, I'm sure he's excited about the room he has inherited.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that translates to a lot of what we've seen. We could just move right over to defense, Stephen Field coaching tight ends, but on defense, that's what stands out to me too with guys, in their trajectory. I look at Charlie Strong. We'll start there. Kevin Steele's a defensive coordinator. Charlie Strong coached linebackers. And one of the things that was asked to me, and I'm sure people have asked you too, David, is why is he going to coach linebackers at Miami? This is a guy that's been a head coach. He was coaching in the NFL last year. Why is this a good fit? We'll start right with Charlie Strong. And having that guy that's been a head coach, you touched on it earlier, at a high level program, at Texas and also Louisville, in USF. So he's been a head coach at different spots. I find it certainly to be probably the biggest hire on amongst all the guys, just based on his resume and kind of how he's fitting in. I think it should be a great fit at Miami.
Yeah, again, on the offensive side, we talked about how they're essentially throwing 2 coaches at a quote unquote problem area on the offensive line, right? I think you could argue that they're doing that at linebacker with Charlie Strong, who is the linebacker co-defensive coordinator, and then Kevin Steele, who is the defensive coordinator, but his background is primarily at linebacker. So I like the construction of the staff on defense in that big picture sense as well. And yeah, look, Charlie Strong, I would have been happy if he was the defensive coordinator, quite frankly. So to your point, to get him as the co-defensive coordinator, a guy who has coached in the NFL, coached plenty of future NFL linebackers at the college level. He knows what it's supposed to look like. And that is a position group that needs to get fixed quickly. And so we'll see we'll see. I'm interested what the feedback is during the course of spring on the linebackers. And, if you want to fix something quickly, devote a lot of resources to the problem. I think they've done that. I think Mario did that with Charlie Strong and Kevin Steele being on this defensive coaching staff.
I do think Coach Strong is going to have a lot of say in what he wants in a linebacker. I think he's going to have all these guys will. I'm not trying to diminish that, but Coach Strong is going to certainly get a strong, get a real good idea at that position. And like you said, he'll get a full glance at it during spring ball. I'd be very surprised if they rolled out the same guys in the spring that they do in the fall. I expect changes to be made, more additions if they can get quality guys in there. But certainly moving forward, the future of this program certainly relies on the linebacker being good. And we've seen a lot of good linebackers over the years, David, and it's certainly not good enough right now. And I think they know that. They've got to be better. And I think the coaches understand that. And I think overall, I think they just have a good understanding that this isn't going to be good enough. That's the thing about coaches that come from winning programs or coaches that have been in the NFL. They know what it looks like when it's successful. And they're going to look at Miami in certain positions and think that it's not good enough right now. And they've got to make changes or get the most out of them or get them better, whatever it might be, but certainly changes will need to be made.
Yeah, I think fresh eyes is valuable with any coaching turnover, right? And I think things got stale, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the ball with, I think there was a lot of assuming that the older guys when it was their time are always going to be the best option. And so if I'm a younger guy, if I'm a younger linebacker, this is an opportunity to show what I got. If I'm an older guy, if I'm a returning starter, I got to prove myself to a coach, a position coach that is going to have a high standard. So fresh eyes, not only a linebacker, but across this whole team. If I'm this coaching staff, I'm being aggressive with who I'm putting out there in different situations and different spots and giving everyone a look because, outside of Tyler Van Dyke and a few other guys, I don't think anyone is really all that safe with their jobs from last year.
We touched on it. Kevin Steele's going to run this defense. David, where do you think Miami's defense is going to be better immediately and in the long term with Coach Steele running the defense?
Well, I'll take the low-hanging fruit just because I don't know if it could get worse, but tackling would be a point of emphasis for me here in year one. Look, I'll be honest, right? I don't know if right now as we speak, if we're talking about 2022, if there's like a potential of playmaking ability to improve, right? Like I would love to say, oh, the corners need to pick off more passes. Oh, the edge rushers need to generate more sacks. I'm not sure if the personnel is there right now today to do that, but some things I think they can control is the tackling. I think they can control third down defense because there was times last year where things just weren't connected like they should be on defense. And in those losses, that the 5 losses last year, those things were amplified, right? Their third down defense and all those losses except Florida State, I think, was like 50% conversion they allowed opponents. So, and then, of course, we all know the tackling. Michigan State, 30 missed tackles in a game. So those would be the 2 key areas. If I'm Kevin Steele, I'm focusing on those areas. And then, yeah, you always emphasize stuff like turnovers and sacks and all that stuff and hope you have the talent to get that done. But to me, tackling, I'll take the low-hanging fruit there.
Yeah, Miami 77th nationally in third down defense allowed. Certainly not good enough. I think one of the things that standing out to you, and I'm just going to put words in your mouth, but maybe the reason why you're not expecting the big jumps in certain players or, because we've seen these guys. I think that's the thing. We've seen these guys quite a bit the last couple of years. Whether it's interceptions or sacks, it's kind of hard right now unless we see it in the spring over to summer and fall of somebody just having one of these breakout huge years where they really, gravitate to having a big year when we've not seen big years at a lot of guys on defense yet. I think that's part of it here. David, defensive line. I'm very interested to see how this defensive line goes with Joe SALAVA'E and Rod Wright coaching D-line, D-ends there. A lot of experience and also up and comer, with Coach Wright there. But just what stands out to you with this and how good can Miami's defensive line be once again near term, currently and also kind of down the road with what they want to do as a program?
I like it because it's a different approach. From what we've seen, that recent years they've split up the secondary, right? So now they are splitting up the D line. I don't know if I have a preference there at this point, but I do think it was a good move, quite frankly, to split the D line rather than the secondary from a recruiting standpoint, because I do think Jamal Adai can handle the secondary recruiting by himself. He's just a beast recruiter. And, I think it was a good idea to give Joe SALAVA'E a little bit of help on the recruiting trail with the defensive line, with the hiring of Rod Wright. So I'm with you, though. It's interesting. You got an older, kind of more of a veteran coach and then a young up-and-coming guy. And I think the hope would be Coach Wright will be kind of a force on the recruiting trail. And I do I think when Mario looks at his roster, he says, man, I got to get more out of this defensive line. particularly the edge rush spots. And so he's giving them their own position coach. And I know he's not a on-field coach, but having Jason Taylor show up every now and then to work with the guys is not going to be a bad thing either.
And certainly Miami, the point of emphasis for Coach Cristobal, if we were to just narrow it down, it's offensive line and defensive line. And
Yes.
I think it's one thing to say it or to think it, but like you said, it's putting resources into it. Defensive line with 2 coaches and Coach Taylor as well. And certainly recruiting, it's a big part. It's a hard position to recruit in terms of there are a lot of talented guys. And I think the reason why it's difficult is because of the drop off. When you have a talented recruit at that position, they really stand out and typically they make a big difference. Whereas guys that aren't as talented, it's tough to really get them to perform like that at the next level, maybe even more so than these other positions, but certainly defensive line. And if you want to recruit at a high level, you've got to get big time defensive linemen, and having 2 guys there, I think is a good thing, like you said, because of the amount of guys that you'll have to recruit at that spot there.
Yeah, it's a great fit. Again, O-line, D-line, linebacker. If I was going to pick 3 areas, those would probably be my 3 areas that need the most attention right now. Maybe corner, but 3 out of the 4 spots getting heavy attention right now.
So Coach Adai, we've touched on him just briefly throughout this year. I'm very interested to see recruiting is always big because you always get those top level. We've seen a lot of 5-star guys in South Florida. Certainly that will be a key for him recruiting. Initially though, David, I'm very interested to see on his player development because they already have some high level guys, particularly at safety. What will he do with them? What kind of impact? How will he use them? I'm very intrigued to see how that's going to work out.
You got to get all 3 guys on the field. And this might be, and we're talking about James Williams, Avante Williams, and Cam Kitchens, right? The 3 safeties. This might be more of a Kevin Steele thing as the defensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, Coach Adai has to, sell that vision as well, because one of those guys is going to have to bump up closer to the line of scrimmage as an in the box safety. And I think we know ideally who that would be. But yeah, I think on defense, I would argue the safety group is the strongest on the defense, and you got to play the strengths of your personnel. So you got to find ways to get all 3 guys on the field at the same time, for all 3 downs. Corner, I'm worried about, quite frankly. And I agree. I mean, look, a coach's job is to get the most out of what he has to work with. And so that's going to be the challenge for Coach Adai there. And there's talented freshmen coming in this summer. I know we're talking here in the spring, but if I'm him, again, looking at a group with fresh eyes, give a young talented guy a shot to show what he can do as well. So corner is definitely, I mean, it's interesting because there's veteran guys there, but they need to just do more.
David, you touched on something you've touched on a few times here about young talent. I think if we look back at last season, Coach Diaz ultimately, his demise there, it was not going to the young guys quick enough, making those tough decisions on upperclassmen. And I know I talk about it quite a bit, and I know we've talked about it too. It is hard to make those decisions as a coach, as a coaching staff. It is much easier, and Coach Diaz even talked about it last year. Look, there's a line of how it's supposed to go for a college player's career. You play a little bit, special teams or whatever, your role increases, you get better each and every year, and it's kind of essentially a plug and play type of a deal. There's not a lot of decisions to be made. That is not ideal, or that is not how it always works. I think coaches have to make tough decisions. You have to push your relationships aside on a personal level and go with whoever the best player is, young or old, whatever you might have thought about him before, because preconceived notions on certain players, I think sometimes can carry over throughout their careers, unfortunately, as opposed to, are these guys getting the job done? And if they're not, you got to make these tough decisions. I'll be very curious to see if we start noticing that early in spring ball, or if it's going to be, or if we're going to have to wait till the season to see if moves like that will be made. But that'll be something I'll be paying attention to.
I think one of the benefits of, transitioning in your first year with a new staff for a new staff is you can be ruthless, in year one. So I would be surprised if they handle guys with kid gloves and aren't aggressive with some moves, because now's the time to do that. I'll be curious what it looks like in year 3. That's 3 years down the road. But yes, to that point, now's the time to ruffle feathers and see how guys respond. And, both ways. Old guys respond to young guys getting more playing time. Young guys respond to not getting on the field like they want. But yes, bottom line, play the best players. That seems obvious. And honestly, I'm not sure that's like a Coach Diaz issue. We've seen it with other coaches at here over the past 15 or so years. But yeah, hopefully that's not going to be an issue with the veteran staff like this.
And I'm not talking about the silly stuff that Al Golden was doing in terms of putting first, 4 stringers and first team unit. Players know who's good and who's not. I with the different jersey color, all that kind of stuff was a little silly. Randy Shannon went through it with playing different guys that certainly, we talked about it at the time, felt like they shouldn't have been up there because there were better players behind other guys. But like you mentioned, if Coach Cristobal, I know he's serious about establishing a culture, and by all means, we all think he's going to be here a while. So establishing that culture is important. I think it starts with personnel decisions and legitimate reasons of why guys are ahead of certain guys. I think will be the big thing. Again, not the silly stuff of playing games, trying to play mental games with guys because everybody knows who's good, but, actually, sticking with it and having consequences. That's what we didn't see enough of with the past regime. Right. Not enough consequences for poor play, bad decisions, whatever that might have been, either on the field, even with the suspensions at times, the on-field suspensions, with targeting, whatever. There just wasn't a lot of consequences for guys. And I think I'd be surprised if we don't see more of that with this coaching staff.
Use the portal to your advantage too, both with if guys want, guys didn't sign up to play for this coaching staff. So if they want to go, let them go. And also that threat of, hey, we can always turn to the portal for a guy to come take your job. Use that to your advantage too. I just think it's easier now than ever for coaches to come in and just be ruthless.
And I do expect that. And again, I think people will have to be a little patient with it. Maybe your favorite guy's not going to be a part of this moving forward, but it is what it is, because we see this all the time with coaching turnovers, player turnover. It's part of it. And I think identifying things sooner than later is important, because you don't want to have guys completely unhappy on the team. If they don't want to be here, you move on from them, and players should move on as well, just for the betterment of their careers. So those will be some things to watch for. David, let's wrap this thing up here. Let's get a final word on this staff as it's finalized here.
Very good staff. I think we should say we do expect Stephen Field to be the tight ends coach. We'll see how that plays out. But regardless, yeah, it's a very strong staff. I think, we've learned Mario Cristobal takes his time, is deliberate with putting together his staff, because it does matter. It is vitally important to his success. And the results at the end of the day, I think look, this is probably the best staff in the ACC. And when is the last time you could say that about a Miami staff?
And that's one reason why I think this team will have immediate expectations from fans, because they look at the coaching staff. And I think if you look at the personnel coming back to the team, this is more than enough, I believe, more than enough to win the division. And I know Miami did not compete for the division last year. They go 7-5, clearly disappointing. But I think with enough coming back, this coaching staff, why can't they win the division? I don't think that they have to wait forever, even though we've only seen one division title from this program over the last however many 20 years or whatever it's been. So I expect kind of them to do well. I think that there's enough here. So David, we'll wrap this up. Plenty more coming. Spring ball just around the corner. We'll have plenty more content and a lot to get into, certainly, but definitely stay tuned. Appreciate everybody for watching. Take care.